Hello and welcome back to another NihongoGamer video. It's that time again, we've got an arcade stick to unbox. So this product comes from a company called Gcom in the UK and it sells at quite a reasonable price. I think it's listed at £120, but you can often get it for 100 quid. Alright, let's take this foam padding out and the arcade stick itself. Alright, just show you the product here. It's almost like an old school console. And as I understand, the point of this arcade stick is not to be a fighting game controller. The idea of this is to just be a cool arcade stick, but it's not a Sanwa lever. And then they've actually built separate buttons for this. I think they might be custom buttons, but instead of using Sanwa style buttons, like the buttons that you would find in an arcade stick at arcades, this is using keyboard mechanical switches. Now, part of the marketing, which is a little bit strange in this product, is that they say this isn't for competitive fighting games. The idea of this is to be a nice, fun stick that you can use on MAME. It's even got like a coin button, so if you're plugged into an emulator, you can program this button to be the coin button, so you can add extra credits. And you can see it's not one of the standard layouts for a fighting game. In fact, most fighting games have support for 8 buttons, so you've got 2 macro buttons. Support for 2 macro buttons. Obviously, this is not designed to be an arcade stick for competitive fighting gamers. But on their website, it actually says, you know, these fast mechanical switches are going to be much more responsive and faster than the buttons you find in most arcade sticks. And the idea being that it will be good for competitive fighting games. So, slightly confused on what it wants to be, but let's just take a look at what it actually is. First things first, I think the design looks really cool. You know, instead of just giving you a simple rectangular prism, it's actually got beveled off edges in various places that make it look cool. Neon design, very Tron on the background. The arcade stick, it does feel like it's a little bit too long and very thin. There are keyboard switches on the inside if you want to have a quick look. Fortunately, they do include a cable in the box. They also included a beer mat. The lever actually kind of reminds me of the Hori Fighting Stick Mini 4, which I don't know if I have anymore. I think I may have sold it. To plug the Gcom Arcade Stick in, you've got a little port here on the side. It's USB-C. And as you can see, they are lit up. That is the micro switch inside the arcade stick. Now, in addition to lighting up, something that comes in the box that I've just discovered is an extra set of buttons. And there you have it, with the PlayStation style buttons installed. Now, actually, the coolest thing about this arcade stick so far is not whether it's got an 8-way joystick or it's got mechanical switches on it. What's really cool is this. Can you see that? Made in Great Britain. If you've seen the IT crowd, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You hear the satisfying clunk of mechanical switches. And it looks like when I had buttons popping out when I was double tapping, it looks like that issue is kind of isolated to some of these buttons. You want all of the buttons to be as solid as this one, because this one isn't going anywhere. But as you can see, some of them do just pop straight off. Oh, and one last thing before we begin. These buttons are concave. It's quite different to what you would get on Japanese arcade sticks that you buy for fighting games. And now it's time to test it out. Let's see how the Gcom Arcade Stick fares in some fighting games. Alright, so I've got the Gcom Arcade Stick plugged in to my PC, and as you can see, I'm running Street Fighter V here. Let's just go ahead and test this arcade stick. Now, I've actually got this set up on my desk because this is quite a small arcade stick. I tried putting it on my lap, and because it's so small, unless you have your legs like quite close together, it's not really going to fit on your lap. This weird shape makes a lot of sense because when you've got your hand on it, as you can see right here, my hand kind of tails off on my desk like this and over like this. And even though these are hard edges, it's not like a soft round curve. That would be quite nice as well. It actually works really well because my hand bends in the... It's like this is exactly where my hand bends over. So it's actually quite a nice sort of crevice for my hands to rest on when I'm using it on a desk. Anyway, let's go ahead and test the game. I'll just move about. You can see that the lever works just fine. Right, left, up, down. But the next thing which was really interesting that I noticed is, watch this. This button is not doing anything. My light kick button is on circle. So it's like, what is going on with the buttons in this game? Okay, I understand that this arcade stick is set up for playing emulators like MAME, but since I generally don't cover emulation on this channel, all I can really do is test it on some arcade games on Steam, or basically fighting games, which it does say that it can do on the website. In fact, it says that on all metrics, it is more like advantageous to use this in competitive fighting games. So it should at least be able to play a fighting game, right? Well, I've got my light kick button, I've got my medium kick button, I've got nothing on R1, the $ button here. This is my start menu. Now, I've had a look at the Gcom website, and it looks like there are a number of things you can do with these switches on the side. Now, they're not labeled, which is really confusing, so I have no idea what they do unless you look at the table on the website. But what's even more confusing is that these are a 2-position switch, front and back. This switch here on the back, this is actually a 3-position switch, so it's got front, middle, and back. Between these 2 switches, you have 6 combinations, and apparently the 6 positions are WASD keys, cursor, main player 1, main player 2, hat switch controller. I'm not even sure what a hat switch is anymore. I think I used to know in the 90s, but I haven't heard the word hat switch for a long time. And joystick controller. Sadly, still don't have any... I've got nothing now. As far as I can tell, all the modes only really work for emulator games that set up the keyboard as your main controller. And so in Notepad, this controller actually thinks it's a keyboard. If I'm in the mode I'm at now, it's front and back on the settings, which means I'm in cursor mode. It will move the cursor around with the joystick, but the actual keys on here are ZXC and VBN. Let's see if I can just set up Street Fighter to play with keyboard remapped. A, B, X, Y, right button, right trigger, left trigger. All right, right, left, up, down, and I've actually got buttons now. Excellent. One thing you should note is that on the website, it does actually say that it's not designed to work with PlayStation or Xbox. This is a PC-only controller. And a number of things that I'm noticing now. First of all, my muscle memory is to do this with my buttons when I go for a throw, because usually the cross button is right underneath the square button. But because they've gone for this very angled shape, which is, kind of reminiscent of some arcade layouts, in a fighting game, you're going to notice that your natural hand position needs to be diagonal if you want to do things like doing a throw with a single finger. But as you can see, now that I have actually got the keyboard set up, I can do all the normal things that I usually do. And you can actually, I was just going to say, you can actually double tap these concave buttons. But as you can see, the main issue with these buttons is that they're injection molded ABS apparently, and if I double tap any of the buttons, you can see that they just like pop straight off. That can be fixed by, tweaking their injection molding process, but the main thing is that they're charging $139 for this when it's not on sale. And in Japan, which I believe it is not on sale, they're charging 20,000 yen, which at the previous exchange rate was $200. So $200 is the price you would pay for what I would call a premium or a regular workhorse arcade stick, the type that actually emulates what you get in the arcades. The joystick is doing its job. I'm not having any issues with input errors. I can backdash, I can forward dash, I can do all my specials. Got my fireballs. Can I do a super move? Okay, everything works fine. If you want to use the L2 and R2 buttons, you'd actually have to move up to the top row, which is where your options button is, and you'll most likely accidentally press options when you're trying to do something like your V skill or your V trigger activation. If you're playing casual arcade games that are not fighting games, however, and you're not in a tournament or doing anything competitive, then obviously this is just fine. Sits on your desk. It's actually quite comfortable. Now, just in case you're interested, I will show you what it looks like on the joystick properties in Windows, because you might be using this on your emulator. If you go into game controllers in Windows, it shows up 2 different arcade sticks at the same time. And in hat switch mode, which is supposedly like a PS4, you get the buttons here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 and 8, and 5 and 7. So 5, 7, 6, 8. But actually, if you click on the second arcade stick under properties, and you're in joystick mode, which is switches back and back, then you do have joystick axis control over here, and you've got the buttons are 1, 2, 3, 4, and then same as before, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. But they're on the second arcade stick. It's not showing up as the first arcade stick, which is probably why it wasn't showing up in Steam. It thought I was the second player and that maybe a person playing on a keyboard was the first player. In any case, this is going to be a bit of a nightmare if you're playing on Steam, but the inputs are coming in, so it's clearly not broken, it's just not set up for Steam. If I'm in WASD keys mode, you can see I've got WASD on the arcade stick, and I've got 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9, 0, 3, 4 on these top row buttons. So 1, 2, 3, 4 across the top. Now if I go into cursor mode, which is front and back, you got 1, 2, Z, ZXC, VBN. In main player 1, we've got middle and front. 5, 1, 2, ZX over here and nothing over here. Listen up, I'm going to end it there for this test. Essentially, it's an arcade stick that only works on your PC. It's mostly for people who already play emulators and they use their keyboard, and instead of using their keyboard, they'd like to upgrade to using actual physical buttons. And in that regard, it does do what it asks. It does do what it says on the box, which is it does give you the option to play your games using keyboard controls, but now using a joystick and buttons. However, there are a number of concerns that I do have about it. Mainly, the first one being the price. This is listed at $139, but for the same price, you can get like a Hori RAP, which is designed for playing fighting games and has it has Hayabusa buttons and a Hayabusa joystick, which are basically arcade quality, and it works on a PlayStation or an Xbox or whatever version it is that you buy. By comparison, the same price gets you the Gcom Arcade Stick, which doesn't work on your console, and it's not really recognized as a joystick in Steam, not properly at least. For $140, really what you're getting with this is the compactness. You're getting a small arcade stick, and don't forget, Hori does make the Nintendo Switch Fighting Stick Mini, which is a similar form factor, maybe a little bit smaller. I think it's a similar form factor, but a little bit lower down. The buttons aren't clicky, I think, as far as I'm aware. They're not clicky. This does have mechanical switches, but as you can see, the quality is not quite there yet. They need to work on that. Once they can make sure that these buttons don't pop out, I'm sure it will be a much more reliable stick. This has light up buttons, mechanical switches, and it's going to be set up already quite nicely with these one-player start button, two-player start button, and the dollar, you've got the coin button, things that you would use in MAME. As you can see on the USB-C port, it does fit in no problem, but it is a little bit lower than it's supposed to be, and so if it goes any further, you'd no longer be able to actually put the cable in here because it's not really matched up with the hole. The second thing is just that these switches, again, if you play on MAME, you'll probably just set it and forget it and it'll be fine. But this is not an intuitive way to choose the modes on your arcade stick. First of all, being blank. But secondly, one of them is a two-way switch and one of them is a three-way switch, so confusing. Are you personally an emulator fan, and is this the ideal stick for you? Let me know in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, and you can join also the NihongoGamer Discord, where everyone is hanging out all the time talking about basically arcade sticks all day long. That's all for today. I'll see you in the next NihongoGamer video.